Whatever blows can be sucked.
Truer words have never been spoken, Doctor. Alrighty, continuing along with Season 15, this time in 1978, which made me realise that I completely forgot to mention, back when I reviewed The Horror of Fang Rock, that the original Star Wars movie had just released around that time in 1977. So I was going to talk about, like, the impact it had on sci-fi, and, like, the parallels between Star Wars and Doctor Who, but I forgot. Ah, well, it's not the end of the world. Besides, talking about Star Wars on the internet, that's not going to get you anywhere on YouTube. No. Now, classic Doctor Who reviews, yeah. That's where it's at. Well, hot off the heels of The Sunmakers, one of my new favourites by the way, comes Underworld. This is probably one of those DVDs you forget you even own as part of the Myths and Legends box set. What a random collection that is. As I said, 1978, another four-parter, and this one I found to be quite comparable to The Sunmakers. The script is quite witty and makes great use of the Doctor and Leela's developing dynamic. The story is similar to last week's Sunmakers, but a little less simple and straightforward. What I mean by that is in Underworld, there's also an oppressed group being oppressed by oppressors. Hard to imagine English is my first language. And I was equally as fascinated at their social hierarchy and positions of power and trying to figure out how they all compare to one another. So, an intriguing enough civilization, but it felt like we were being drip-fed information. You're still learning things right up until that final episode, whereas with the Sunmakers, they give you all the information you need from the get-go, focusing less on mystery and answering questions and more on action. But I will stop comparing the two now, with my final note being that I liked the Sunmakers a little bit more, but Underworld came pretty close. There are so many great ideas utilised in this serial, whether they be outlandish contraptions like a light ray that zaps you into a docile state. Like, seriously, it just hits you and zonks you out like, oh, thank you. I'm gonna go stare at this wall now. I can imagine that one being popular with future space stoners. Hard to believe they only used it twice in one scene and never again. Or how about a shield gun? Why has that not been a thing before? It's so simple, yet so brilliant. A shield that can also shoot. Like, what more could you need? Maybe a bigger shield, possibly, but it puts the gunblade from Final Fantasy VII to shame. Or popularised in Final Fantasy VIII and brought back into Advent Children number 7, or whatever, I don't care. So yeah, there's a lot of cool gizmos and gadgets, but also some really creative sci-fi concepts. Like potentially being buried alive by your own ship's gravitational pull, pulling and sucking in various bits of space debris, turning your own spacecraft into like a prison planetary formation thing. I don't know if that makes any scientific sense, but who cares? Cool sci-fi. Also, I like the idea that this humanoid race of aliens that the Doctor, Leela, and K9 encounter have the ability to live for tens of thousands of years thanks to Time Lord science. It's some form of regeneration. There's probably some untapped lore potential hiding just under the surface. I don't know, did they really care about what's canon and lore back then? I know in today's modern society, we love it. We love seeing how, like, things fit into one another and what is canon, what isn't, lore, and blah, 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 blah. Whereas back then it was probably just like, put 3 Atlantises in the show, who cares? Truth be told, as much as I enjoyed it, I did lose focus a couple of times, leading to there being a few things I didn't quite fully understand. Like, what's the deal with the Oracle? Or how about the Seers, or the Keepers, or whatever they're called? And most of all, why do they look like that? Like, that looks like it could be a potentially iconic design, but you really only see it for a couple of scenes, and yet it still made the DVD and box set cover. Actually, what's the deal with this DVD cover anyway? Like, did this even happen in the serial? I have no memory of this admittedly cool side character carrying a woman like it's Asylum of the Daleks. Anyway, back on topic, things I didn't notice. It's not necessarily the episode's fault, mind you, that I lost focus a couple of times, because I would easily sit down and watch this again to pick up on those missing details. It is very watchable, despite some of its admittedly less than stellar aspects. For instance, all 3 cliffhangers are bad. They suck. They're the kind of fake danger scenarios that would crop up a lot back in the 60s, almost as if they were forced to include them, which I know happens a lot going forward to like the Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy era. But anyway, imagine, if you will, a character shows up and points a gun at the Doctor, and there's a dramatic zoom, cut to credits. So you wait a week, and when the next episode starts, he goes, "Oh, sorry, Doctor, I didn't recognise you." Also, speaking of 60s Doctor Who, it's the long-awaited return of the overly loud sound effect. Haven't heard about that one for a while. But the electrocutioning, brain-boiling sound effect nearly had my brains melting out my ears. And while there are some admittedly very cool special effects, there's also some really dated ones. The zero-gravity arm-flapping scene had me choking on my oat milk. Although, having said that, for the first time in ages, I decided to watch some of the behind-the-scenes special features stuff. And it was fascinating seeing how they managed to work a lot of the blue screen keying things into the camera live while filming. I had no idea how the technology worked back then, and it was so surprising to see just how similar it is to today's practices. Although, maybe it wasn't the best idea for me to watch some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, because is Tom Baker actually an a-hole? Because he really seems like a bit of a dick on set here. I'm sure you could chalk it up to catching him on a bad day, but it would explain a lot about the way his Doctor can be really mean sometimes. Was Tom Baker secretly another Bill Hartnell, and just a grumpy old bugger on set making everybody miserable, and people nowadays just overlook it because of how much they enjoy the show? That could also explain his reluctance to return in the future. Anyway, I better stop overthinking it. Especially because, as I said, I quite enjoyed Underworld. It's one that you can easily watch and enjoy without having to pay too much attention to, which I personally appreciate. And hey, just for fun, here is my new favourite out-of-context Fourth Doctor moment. I don't know, there's just something about K9 exploding into existence that really tickles me. But one final note before I wrap this up is, I think this serial solidified a feeling I've been getting quite a bit lately this season, and that's that Leela has become one of my favourite companions. I've come to admire their Doctor-companion dynamic, and moments such as their non-verbal communication show growth. Like, there are times where she can practically read the Doctor's mind and know what he's thinking and can act and react accordingly. Sometimes. Like I've said before, I quite liked how the Doctor recognised quite early on that she was more capable and less of a damsel or a nuisance. And sure, while he's kept up the Third Doctor's nasty habit of being quite dismissive and, quite frankly, rude towards his female companions, she never really dwells on it and quite often bites back herself. Yeah, actually, the more I think about it, she's an ideal companion for this Doctor. And I would go so far as to put her up with, like, Jo and Stephen as some of my favourite companions, but not quite Jamie and Victoria tier. Ah, yes, suffice to say, I can't wait to see her mini adventures with the Doctor going forward. What? And we've made it to the end of another classic Doctor Who review. Just one more serial to go this season, and it's one that I've seen before, and, you guessed it, don't remember anything about. But apparently people really don't like this one. Guess I'll find out next week while we cover Invasion of Time. Thanks for watching.